Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 77th show of Get Out of Rap TV, your show all about contact centers, CX, and lots of other nonsense. I'm going to start first because in case I forget, which I always do, by thanking my partners above me. You can see them here: DDC Outsourcing, who I do DDC discusses with; Evaluagent, who I'm going to be talking at their virtual conference coming up. OneCom, we've got a webinar planned, and Better, a brand new outsourcer who are doing great things. Richard Knox is there. So without them, I couldn't do anything. So really good show lined up for you today. Something new. We've got some panelists here waiting in the green room. There's nothing there for them, but a great panel, and we're going to have a good chat. Darren is here. Good morning, Darren. Great to see you. Something new today. We all love a VT. You might have seen this last week, but we have something brand new for the show. So it is time to welcome in the panel. Good morning, gents.
Morning, Martin.
Morning.
Now, first of all, before I let everyone introduce themselves, you might notice a lack of diversity in the panel. We were going to have a lovely lady called Rachel from South Africa who's been unable to join us. So you're going to have to forgive us. But Danny certainly is representing for hair, and the rest of us are not. But please do say hello to Dan, Pete, and Danny. We are going to be talking about performance management, but before we start, if I can just come to you, Dan, first of all, for a quick intro, and then Pete and Danny.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan Light, founder of Different Edge Leadership. Good to be here.
Thank you, Dan.
Me next, head of client engagement at BPA Quality. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on, mate.
And lastly, another Dan, but Danny.
I'm Danny Wareham. I'm an organizational psychologist who believes that happy bees make tasty honey.
And we do love that phrase, and I'm sure it's going to be relevant in this conversation today. I just want to start with really just asking all three of you, when I put this out about performance management, what was it that made you go, yeah, you know what, I want to talk about that? And I'll go reverse order this time just to kick us off. So Danny.
Two things. One is I love the work that you do. So anything to support and amplify your voice is never a bad thing, Martin.
Thank you.
And the second is when you care about people, there are certain processes within contact centers that are there to benefit people that are often not benefit people. And performance management is one of those things that's kind of misunderstood and seen almost as a stick potentially to beat people with. And that's not what it is. So that's why I wanted to get involved.
That's a lovely start. What about you, Pete?
I mean, I think Danny's hit most of it there for me. It's you know, I've been talking about performance management for probably 12-18 months now as part of this kind of wider focus on, I just think we're pushing down too much on people, you know, with all the technology that we've got, with all the various different ways that we're kind of looking to increase how we support more complex customers, you know, and their needs. We're reverting back to let's follow all the numbers all the time and make that a people problem at the front line, you know. And we really need to change the narrative and how we approach that.
And Dan, that great points, Danny and Pete. But Dan, what about you?
Very similar to the guys. I think that often it's seen as a deficit model in terms of thinking. It only arises really, the focus goes on when things are going wrong. It's seen as a negative. And also for me, working with clients, I find it's amazing the disconnects between the responsibility of the people that are ultimately responsible for whatever they perceive performance management being, and just turning it into an arbitrary form exercise, and the disconnect between the impact and the outcome. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic for me too. Yeah,
it's funny how you all kind of you've all used language around how perhaps there's a need for us to ensure we understand what it is and what its purpose is, but also that in an ever complex industry that we're working in, that we've got to make sure that we are updating it and doing it the right way. What when it comes to that, what does good look like when it comes to performance management? Anyone could pick that up. Go for it.
Starting with the big questions there, aren't you, mate? I think real quickly for me, because I don't want to take too much of the time, but genuinely, I think you have to start with business performance management, right? The checks and balances of a wider organizational perspective on how's the business performing, and then work out what does that mean from that kind of high level, this is our goal as a business, through to the execution at the operational and team and the individual level, to make sure that's all aligned, and that your indicators aren't becoming targets, that are more objectives, right? They're there to give you that kind of gauge of how things are happening. Are they happening as you want them to, or do you need to put some corrective action in place? And that you need to build it in a way that supports, enables, empowers, not, as I think Dan particularly said, when things seem to be going a bit wrong, it's something you wheel out the cupboard and start waving around the place.
Mm-hmm. I'd build on that as well, that we are an outcome-focused industry. We love ourselves a KPI, but the outcome is the honey. What you really want to encourage is the right behaviors. You don't outperform competitors, you outbehave competitors. And a lot of our performance management processes focus on that honey, focus on what's your conversion, what's your handling time, what's your wrap time, what's your attendance, rather than what are the behaviors that are going to support our organization, and then how do you amplify and recognize those. And the second issue is that it's often seen as pejorative. It's something that's a bad thing. Performance improvement is not a bad thing. Yet we use performance improvement plans and performance management in isolated cases for people that are below the sort of standard distribution, the average performance. Whereas in an ideal world, every single member of staff from the CEO down should be on a performance improvement plan. They might have different things that they're working on, but that takes away that kind of the perception that it's a negative. And actually it's all about how do we improve the behaviors that then result in the performance that we require.
Yeah, I think, again, building on both points there, I think spot on, really. For me, there's a language thing as well, to Danny's point, performance and outcomes. What are the inputs? And if I join your organization, I kind of want to know that on day one. What's the expectation? What does good look like? What's going to be really helpful to me from people that are doing this job really well? Rather than being 6 months in and sweating for 6 months about a review, and then all of a sudden finding out I could have been and should have been doing this and not that. So I think that language, all the KPIs, absolutely, but they're all the outcomes that will come through the behaviours, as Danny said, and through just showing up and doing these things, and in the moment having the conversations that count, rather than leaving it to all of a sudden I'm on a review.
Do you think then, because these are great points, and it kind of is something that I've talked about before, that why is it synonymous now with, or not now, but I can remember being a team leader and a contact center manager, especially for newer individuals. If I said to them, oh, we're going to have a performance review or performance management meeting on Thursday, what have I done? They were fearful. I created anxiety for them for like 2 days, because they were thinking they were in trouble, and they would scuttle off and go and speak to their colleagues and go, what's going to happen? Do you firstly, why is that? But secondly, do you think we need to do a bit of a better job of communicating in inductions and things like that? That, to Danny, your point about it, this is normal. you know, we want to we want to help you get better, and to do that we have these things that are called performance reviews, performance management, performance improvement. But why is it, do you think, it's become synonymous with negativity?
I'll let the other gents jump in, but you know I'm going to talk about culture. So Pete, Dan, you have the stage.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah. I think it's as we've already kind of touched on, that outcomes view, and almost that management is by exception, right? So with everything stuck in red, amber, green traffic lights, we're talking about the things that we think are off target. All the focus is on those key things. Then in turn, that kind of punitive approach that we see too often is because it becomes something that's put off until it becomes serious enough that it's coloured in amber or red, and then it becomes a conversation that, instead of being proactive and keeping things in the green, we're almost firefighting and reacting to it in a way that, again, it becomes reductive to the point where it's, these numbers aren't where they need to be and you need to move them. You know, so again, it always drives those conversations in a way that becomes quite command and control, becomes quite negative. And a lot of the time, the conversation is you need to get this number from there to there, or get this outcome from there to there. But there's actually very little support in, okay, so how are you going to do things differently to make that actually happen? So then it reinforces, to your point, MT, it reinforces that view that I'm just going to sit around worrying until it comes time for me to be told off. Right. And I think the key there is we have to kind of break that cycle. To the point about communication, we really have to, it's not about communicating more, it's about communicating effectively. You know, what is the right amount of communication in the right way? What's the right support in the right way? So even just things like getting rid of an annual review, because there's 6 or 12 months of, is it going right or is it going wrong? Let's sit down and really reduce it into a conversation. Let's have regular check-ins and actually make them more informal, make them more about how do we continually course correct, as opposed to, you know, we've got 6 months in, nothing's happened, right? So you're in trouble because your numbers aren't where they need to be. You know, so it's yeah, communication is an absolute basic of it, but it has to be effective. It has to be in a way that helps. You know, it just has to be a part of an effective support process. Or let's go get the big stick because it's time to talk numbers.
Get my whacking stick.
Yeah, and I won't steal Danny's thunder because he's all things culture. But so I mean, cultures don't change, people do. So it's kind of like, you know, and you get the team you deserve. So if we've got managers and leaders that are working in that model that Pete's describing there, where it's kind of reactive, you know, in terms of performance management and behaviours, why aren't we encouraging people to like own their fuck ups and kind of go, look, you know, we appreciate people that around here that take responsibility, and what does that look like and sound like around here, and give examples and cultivate and nurture those behaviours. So it does come down to that climate that we create, but we have to get people thinking and talking differently about performance per se. To your point, Martin, in induction, I go one step further, and it even needs to be in the interviews and in the what kind of person are you, because how we operate around here is we are a performance-based business. We have to survive, and this is what performance looks like. Give me examples of owning that yourself. So I think it's the lexicon, it's the understanding for certainly managers that are mainly, if I'm honest, people that are kind of deployed at the front line level, and how that goes up. But hopefully that's a segue, Danny, to come in on that bigger culture piece.
Yeah, it fits perfectly. Culture is behaviors. So if you have if you have behaviors that focus on a specific number, so if you take something basic like AHT, if you have an AHT target of 600 seconds, if people are below that, nobody says anything because you've hit the mark in terms of your target. If you're above that, then we'll have a chat, and we'll have an informal chat, and then we'll go through the 3-step process towards a disciplinary. But any performance is a distribution curve. You'll have some people that are above and below on certain days, on certain weeks. What really matters is what are we here to achieve, and how can you contribute towards that? And you might have some non-negotiables around some behaviors. You know, you don't swear at customers, for example, or you keep customers' data safe. But broadly, how can you have some autonomy and flexibility within your lane so that it's not a constant catching people doing it wrong and we don't say anything when they're above their target? And that, when you see behaviors that don't support your business, we tend to focus on the behavior. If we've got a salesperson that is dodgy, why is that salesperson dodgy? Let's put caveats in their commission structure to take it away, rather than what's encouraging that behavior in the first place. And often it's the first line managers who we've just left to bob along on the current like jellyfish, rather than developing and investing in them. And they're in an almost stress state that they've got to keep their heads down because they don't want to show that they're not quite comfortable with what they're doing. But they can't go to their ops managers because often the ops managers are also bobbing along. So that we need this kind of honesty around what are we here to achieve and how can I best contribute towards that? Because the culture manifests from everyone all the time. And if you're only talking about when things go wrong, then you're inadvertently encouraging people not to put their hand up, not to ask for help, not to admit mistakes. And I will just bob along with everybody else on the current and hopefully be below everybody's radar. And that's not helpful for anybody.
Let's just pick up some comments that have come in. Marianne, good to see you. Read my post today. I think you're all going to love it, considering this conversation. We will do, and thank you for sharing the link. Joshua, oops, sorry, I've cut your top of your heads off, chaps. To Mark's point, it's only ever used in a negative context, so employees have been trained to think of it that way. To Danny's point, I agree it ought to be used at all times and done in such a way that it is made clear that this applies to everyone, is not targeted at only specific people, and is an encouragement and empowerment tool rather than a punitive action. I love that. And Amandip, good to see you. I know you always come up with some lovely comments, much like Joshua and Marianne's was, but let's see. Amandip says, in the past, I've seen management shy away from having difficult conversations. If coaching is delivered well, then rarely should you have to go through the whole performance management process because you have set the standards.
Just to build on that, why are management avoiding the conversations? That's a behavior that is being encouraged by something else. Is it because, well, actually, I don't know how to have those. I don't have the skills around dealing with difficult conversations. Is it that if I get it wrong, my boss is going to slap my wrist and there's a fear factor? So we focus on the behavior rather than what's encouraging that behavior.
Yeah. So true. Good morning, Jordan. I think one of the things that you touched on there, guys, was that if it's a positive thing that we are doing often, then it removes that kind of fear. So I've worked in a contact center where the routines, and if you were a new person coming in, if you saw others around you going, oh, I've got my performance review, and they went off and they came back and went, yeah, it's great, it's really helped, like a coaching session, versus where, Pete, you mentioned these kind of annual reviews. I worked somewhere where there were no reviews until the end of the year, and then we were given like a big binder that if you had a team of 15, you were like, it's going to take me a week just to get all the prep done, and you were having to go out and like a detective and find evidence to match. And the concept I thought was quite good because it was very much based around how do we take our KPIs and fit them into the company values, right? So you could go into that, but then you had one section in particular, which us and the team, so us being the team leaders and the team, were like, how can I evidence integrity over a year? What evidence how do I do that? So I was exposed to both. You had regular and often and positive. I don't think we were as evolved, Danny, as you mentioned, but we tried to be. We were on that kind of journey of thinking about the causes of, we weren't just focused on outputs. But from that, you then had the other place where I worked, where you would dust off your lever arch files and sit down with someone and go, right, come on then. Here we go.
And then even once that process is done, it goes into a forced distribution curve, which undermines what you were doing anyway. Yeah, I think that's a case study in how not to do it.
Yeah, and then you find there's hundreds of managers trying to put people out of performance because there's not the budget to reward the good performance.
I don't know if you've been in this situation, but in those conversations, the people that are in the middle of the distribution don't get spoken about. It's only the people at the shoulders of, should I move him or her up or down to fit into some budgetary amount or so, because we've got to have 15 top performers and 50 at the next one. And then it misses the point that when you go down to a granular advisor level detail, you miss out on, why are we here? Does it matter that Dave's got a 550 AHT and Steve's got a 650 AHT? The team's in on its target. The customer service is good. We're profitable because we know what we're contributing towards. We are recommended as a place to work by our employees. So there's an EMPS factor as well. Those are the important measures, not the I'll do enough not to get sacked.
Yeah,
I'll just be compliant, not committed.
That's the irony, isn't it? More performance management and no more performance. Whether I like it or not, I'm trying to push my wife for an annual performance review for me. But she gives me an hourly one, so I know it's coming. But I worked with a client recently, and they had around 16% of their whole sales force on performance management, which they changed to capability management because that makes a difference. And credit to them, we had a conversation, and we chewed the fat, and ultimately they had an amnesty, and they just got rid of the lot. And they owned the fact that they didn't really know why or how these people had even got on. And all of a sudden, so we've got zero performance management, like formal. Sales start to go up, effort starts to go up, sickness started to go down. Now, if you're in that mix and you're one of those people that really do deserve to be on what we would deem, that performance management, you're on the case study, you've got to really pull your socks up or try and get away with it because you've been given a chance, right? So now you've got to own it and do something about it. And people invariably, they step up. So I think, to Danny's point there, it's just the mindset around it is incredible, and you can get such better returns by not being so arbitrary in terms of formality and this operational rhythm that you talked about, Martin, where it's just performance review time. It's all quite nonsensical, really.
Picking up on a point as well there you made, T, about values, behaviours, principles for the organisation. I'm a firm believer that a building, a logo, a brand doesn't have values and principles and behaviours. That's not a thing. If it's painted on the wall, great. But if that's it, doesn't matter what's on the wall, right? It's
or once a year you see it as chapters in a lever arch file.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if it's stuck up on the wall and every now and again it's referenced in some kind of leadership town hall or something, it's as useful as a chocolate fire guard, right? It needs to be baked into and actually support a positive kind of behavioral approach to things. It support that culture that, if we're going to be radically transparent, this is what it actually means. If we're going to be radically candid, this is what it actually means. It's not an excuse to point fingers at each other and say that behavior says I can tell you you're not very good. It needs to work in a way that it's actually, they're either baked into how you show up from the top down, or it needs to get thrown out the window, to Dan's point, because actually if everyone focuses on building complex, rigid frameworks, then they're so focused on maintaining those complex, rigid frameworks that they're not actually focused on, well, what's it actually delivering, if anything? So you lose the point, the value of the outcome in the process of just being busy doing the thing, right? And then it's busy work and there is no value to it. People then inevitably get stressed. I haven't got any time to put any coaching sessions in because I've got to do the paperwork, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And it's like, actually, no, all of this will go away if you focus on positive performance management, and all of this paperwork about sickness and incapability and whatever else it is, other people who want to leave, internal stuff, that tends to start going away because people want to be there and they want to do a good job,
it's so funny as well that when you earlier spoke about certainly some of the annual reviews, are any of them linked to a bonus or remuneration? That place where I was talking about, I can remember one year getting contacted by both my manager and HR saying, can you look at your scores again? You've got too many fives. And could any of them be 4.5s? So they still feel like they've done a good job, but they don't get the highest payout because you've got too many fives in your team in comparison to some of your peers. And you just think, what? Even then, as a naive kind of young, where you're just going to follow what you're told, basically. I do remember kind of not kicking off was the wrong word, but kind of standing my ground, or at least asking for more interrogation of this process. Going, do you want to check the validity of what I've done? Because that's a different question. If I've done it wrong, or you can help me do these reviews better, that's fine. But if this is just drop a couple of fives down and then you'll be fine, I just found it insane.
And whilst you're there, Martin, just reiterate that one of our values is integrity, right? So, and honesty.
Right? We can have a conversation another time, because I have controversial views on values. I don't think organizations should have values, but that's one for another conversation. It always amazes me, particularly in the larger organizations, how many have this weird Stockholm syndrome, that we know that our policies and our processes and our protocols and our reward mechanics and so on are not quite right, but they're ours and you're not touching them and we're not changing them. And they become almost shackled to this abusive relationship with the processes that are making their lives harder, that make decision-making move like molasses. And often it's because, particularly at the coalface, we don't really know what we're contributing towards. We answer the phone and we ring the tills and bring the sales in, or we answer the phone and we deal with the after sales and complaints and customer relations, but not the why do we do this? What difference does it make? And in the absence of that, people bring their own motivations, their own motives to work. So then it can drive the behaviors of, well, I'll just make sure I hit my targets. I'll hit my key performance indicators, and missing the point that it's a key performance indicator. It should indicate what you already know, that the behaviors that you have are heading in the right direction. And if your MI went down in your contact center, are you telling me you couldn't say who your best employees were if you didn't have any MI? We know that's not the case. It's a fuel gauge. It's not a meter. These people are exhibiting the right behaviors in line with what we're trying to achieve. If we're still in that values kind of mindset, that it's aligned with those values in terms of the behaviors, success will follow. Happy bees make tasty honey. Let's stop focusing. We want MI to break sometimes.
We do.
That's kind of the point.
Now, Danny and Pete, you might need to stand up again. Here's a couple of comments to catch up on.
Oh, wow.
Even stood up, you're not going to get past this one from Marianne. It's about the culture, the environment. We were talking about humans. We are all very different, and we need to appreciate each and every individual and how we work with them to develop and nurture them, to support them. If you look after and care for them and give them clear direction and support, it is amazing how they respond and go above and beyond. Educate team leaders and operations managers on how to nurture their people, not just trying to manage them. Yeah, I think everyone would be in agreement with that. Marianne, thank you. Joshua, it is important that the right KPIs are considered, because often there are KPIs which are not actually doing what they are supposed to measure performance, because in striving to meet the KPI, employees are hampered from actually performing, while those who are top performers might end up having a particular KPI showing badly because that KPI is out of alignment with the actual goals.
Yeah. So it's not a key performance indicator. We're measuring the wrong things, or we're looking at the wrong things.
You might be onto something about values. I know we've skirted around this kind of thing. Me and Pete have spoken about this before. Marianne says, Peter, I agree with you completely. It's not about the values. Aman Dip says transparency is another value that holds no value. People don't want to share what's happening in their areas with people outside their direct areas. That's very true as well. And I just want to pick up, Danny, do you think then, you mentioned this kind of Stockholm syndrome where we're at the mercy of processes that we know are probably not fit for purpose, but everybody is just still on the motorway, right? Still just following them. Is it because it's all about effort? We know that to break this, or Dan, to your example that you gave where you just said, right, it's an amnesty, or we're just gonna, come on everyone, let's be honest, let's stop this and really, really look at it. Is that the thing that's holding people back? That, well, we've got it, we know it's not fit for purpose, but my God, what a job that would be if we had to undo it all.
This is a hole, but it's our hole. There's not an easy answer because we're complex animals, and one of the things that we do, there's a bias called false attribution bias, which means that once we've made a decision, we're invested in something, any benefits from that were our fault, and anything that goes wrong was somebody else's fault. So on the football field, when we're winning, it's I had a great game and I was in flow. And when you lose, it's, well, the referees were against us today and the conditions weren't right, and so on. And in business, we have the same thing when we've decided this is the right IT stack, or this is the right process, or this is the right level of conversion that we're setting for this month. Even in the face of evidence that completely blows that argument out of the water, we will still double down because that decision has become part of our identity. So if anybody challenges the decision, they're not challenging our opinion, they're challenging us as an individual. And you can probably see the parallels with certain political things that are going on in the world at the moment. So having outside eyes, whether that's new starters, whether it's somebody that's seconded from a different area of the business, whether it's a counsel or a consultant, to be able to come in that doesn't quite have that same type of biases, to go, this is actually what's tripping you up at the moment, and you don't realize it because, you know, a fish doesn't know it lives in water. It's just how we get things done here, and it's not so bad that it's a horrible pond, and it's not so great that I notice. It's just how we do things here. So you'd expect a rambling answer from me, but the kind of long and short of it is, we don't always know what it is that's causing us pain because we just live with it, because that's how it is here. So having fresh eyes, listen to your new starters, listen to the people that are leaving your exit interviews, listen to outside advice as well, because that can be gold dust, because you don't know you live in water.
Mm. Do we think, is there anything here that you've seen any changes due to technology, or do you think that's going to have more of an impact on performance management for its betterment, or is this just another complication?
The latter for me. I don't think we've really set ourselves up for success once again, right? If you look at some of the contact payable information that you shared previously in the read through, we can see that along with the average number of screens, the average number of requirements, the average amount of tech that people have at their disposal / in them in, then at the same time, the average handle times of each interaction, the average complexity as felt in terms of effort by both agents, advisors, and customers, all go in the same direction, right? They're all going up. So there's no such thing as a quick phone call anymore, because most of the time you're going to be deflected into some kind of omni-channel strategy, right? Where whether you want to or not, you're probably going to be forced to a website, you're going to be forced to a bot, you're going to be forced to something where actually customers want to talk to other people. Customers want to talk to someone that represents that company, who represents the chance to resolve the thing that they've contacted about. And there's research come out recently for the ICS this year, Forrester in the US. One of the biggest challenges that everyone's kind of recording is that people are worried they can no longer talk to other people when they try and contact a brand, right? And if that's 60-70% of your contact base saying, actually, this technology is getting in the way, I'm concerned that customer experience is going to get even worse. And clearly we haven't solved the issue of, you know, chucking more tech at it, because yeah, cool, AI is everywhere, but it's not fixing things that are fundamentally led by humans. So emotion management, you know, contextual analysis, and flexibility. It's great in some things. So yeah, there are things that chatbots can do and voice bots can do in a way that is so much faster and more efficient. But when you take away all the kind of mundane day-to-day activity, what's left is those complex kind of gnarly corner cases where you really focus in on a human-to-human connection to resolve that. Right? You're building trust and you're reducing confusion. Right? You want an outcome where it's owned on both sides. There's an understanding that something is going to happen to resolve the problem. Tech can't do that. You know, and instead of supporting our people with tech in a way that says this is going to uplift, engage, enable, it's just put more numbers in front of people. We've got even more granular at how we measure people, right? And probably 6 to 12 months now, I've been banging on about this. How many KPIs do we kind of put in key performance indicators, right? Some people have got 20 or 30 in their overall kind of management deck, and that's the level of a Formula One pit crew.
They can't all be key performance indicators.
Yeah. They can't all. If everything's critical, nothing's critical. If everything's important, nothing's important. It just becomes noise at that point. And technology is, to my mind, it can do great things, but right now it's adding to the noise. I'll put my soapbox down.
No, I completely agree. And that kind of 20 KPIs, you know, I can remember very early on talking to my team and saying, look, let's so we're all managing our expectations here. They're never all going to be green. There's always going to be something because we've got loads of them. And, you know, and that is a culture shock for people coming into the industry, that all of a sudden in a lot of centers, there's a lot of measurements, and we're going to talk about them.
Yeah.
But one thing I would say that I do think is a positive change is seeing software out there or contact centers that share everything with their agents, and they have their own agent dashboards, but they gamify it as well. So when you think about performance management and its connotations being slightly negative, when you start adding that you can see you're getting awards, a badge, something like this, it becomes something. It makes you don't even have to be competitive, but it makes you you get some validation, you get recognition, you can understand, and I think that's on the right path for sure. Yeah. But Danny, I cut you off. You were going to say something.
No. So there's two parts to this. Quick one: technology is not a solution. Technology is not a solution. Technology is a catalyst or an enabler. It allows people to do stuff. Yet we often talk about we offer technology solutions. So to answer the original question, yes, it can potentially help if we have that mindset that we still need the people to make the technology do what it is that we want to do, to implement it the way we want to do. The bit that butts up against that we tend to forget, and it's one of the reasons the stat I heard was that 76% of all change management programs fail within the first 12 months. It's because we don't consider the people part fully. And if people want to go and have a look, there's a model about social experience called SCARF. And these are the kind of prime motivators of individuals. Status. Do I matter? Am I seen? Well, if you're taking jobs away from me, or you're using some clever thing to tell me how to do my job, whether that's knowledge management, then subconsciously I feel less important. So I'm going to butt up against that. Certainty. Do I know what's happening? Well, no, because I'm not quite sure how AI is going to change, or is my job safe if they start taking away the simpler interactions? Autonomy. Do I have control over what I do? Am I seen? Do I matter? And all of these things influence how likely people are going to use the technology, who are going to interact with each other, who are going to adapt to change. And we tend not to think about the soft, squishy thing in our change. And that soft, squishy thing is the only bit that makes the technology work. So
I think, sorry, Dan, I think Danny's point there, again, we're looping back to how good are we in terms of how we talk to our people, the language we use, with the climate, the behavior, we're back there again. We're back there again because we have the best piece of kit in the world. But if people think they're losing something by it going in, that's Danny's point. So what I find normally with like leaders and managers, that they're very poor at managing the transition of how people are feeling through those things. Sometimes it's just obvious communication. It's how are we involving people so they feel involved, and who might need certain specific pieces of information. It can't be a one-wash shop for the whole organisation, right? There'll be one particular team or division that needs more insight or more understanding of this thing. And a lot of that stuff, to Danny's point, I think is kind of forgotten because we've got this new shiny thing, and most people will just love it. And when we talk about culture, you know, it's often about people's beliefs. It's their beliefs and expectations. What do I expect from a performance management review? Well, if I expect this, it's probably going to be that's how I feel about it. And what do I believe about this technology? If I believe it's there to help this organisation achieve the goal, brilliant, I'm on board. I can go. But if I believe that there's a covert plan to get me out in 2 years, guess what? I think that's slightly different. Yeah. So it's management beliefs.
It's the nail on the head, Dan. If 200,000 years ago, if you were kicked out of your tribe, it was a literal death sentence. Our brains haven't evolved since then. There's no redundancy in your brain that says this is just a rational conversation with my boss about performance. It's I am potentially going to die. That's what your brain does. So if there is a threat that is perceived, whether that's AI is going to change my role against my will, or it's going to take my role, or after I've had this conversation with my boss, I might be on a disciplinary, or I might be out of the tribe, then you create this kind of groupthink, which is not just about people towing the line and being the same, but it also makes them immune to any threats that are coming from the outside, just like zebra coalescing together when there's a line running around. That's why change stops. It's because people have coalesced around this. There is a mortal threat out there, and I need to not be part of that at all. I'll just bury my head in the sand, huddle into the group, and hopefully I won't get eaten.
And when you should say, hey, everybody, Performance Bot is our friend. It's time for you to plug in for your monthly Performance Bot session.
No, it has to be. It's not a bolt-on. It's built in. So performance management, we do this all day, every day. When you say morning to your team, that's about improving performance. It's not just the process.
And I think, you know, there's something in the language, and that because all three of you definitely are advocates of this is just something we should be doing all the time. And if you think about other industries, whether you are a car mechanic or a doctor, it is expected that someone is going to help you get better at the job, and it would be weird if they weren't doing that. But we somehow have just the headline that we have is, if we're talking to you about your performance, it means that we are potentially kicking you out of the tribe. Yes. which is insanity.
Yes. Well, it's not insanity to those people that are feeling threatened, and you don't rationalize it. It's not like you think, oh, I'm not part of the tribe and I don't live in a cave anymore, and I'm not going to get eaten by something if I am out of the tribe. But unfortunately, that's not how our brains work.
Yeah, and we end up with this madness of, then you get leaders and managers going, and while we're here, why don't you give me some feedback on how I'm doing?
Yeah.
Everyone's been thinking, there's no way in hell I'm telling you how useless you are.
You're doing great.
Yeah. I'm gonna cover up, and then so what we'll do? Oh, we'll make it anonymous, and then it becomes useless again. So it's all about relationships. It's about the connection with the people. It's about just, I need to believe that when you say this thing, you're going to do it. And when you do ask me my opinion and you say it's valuable, I want to be proven, oh, no, it actually is valuable. And sow the seeds. I'm not stuck in the groove. You want to build my cognitive, kind of buy-in to go, yeah, I'll do that again. I see there's value in it. I feel that I'm part of this team. I don't think it's just words. And that doesn't happen overnight, but we're all too scared to kind of confront it. And, we've been there before. To your point earlier, Mike, and I've been on both the management side and the receiving end of someone who's trying to get me down just half a point. And I'm like, no. Well, what could we do about, well, let's just have an honest conversation. What you're trying to do is you've got a quota, and HR have told you, and now I don't believe you. So when you do come to me through a change and you want me to get on board, I'm not on board with it.
Mm.
So we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot a lot.
Yeah, you can't tell us what your culture is. Your behaviors show us, and trust is your body's biological response that somebody else has your well-being at heart. So being able to show people that you care about them, that you're not just trying to put them into a forced distribution, that you're not just doing a by rote, by the numbers, you've had this performance, therefore we've got to take you in a room and have a chat. That sends a message that you don't really have my well-being at heart. So trust is going to be really difficult to build in those situations. So what we really want is it to be performance management to be set from day one, that we are all here to get better. And there are lots of different mechanics and processes that we use all of the time. It's not a documented discussion as part of a one-to-one each month or 6 months or 12 months. It's woven through everything that we do, because that's how we get things done around here.
I love it. Well, Dan Light, Danny Wareham, Pete Dunn, thank you so much for being the first panelists on GOW TV Panel, giving up nearly an hour of your time, but fantastic to hear your views, your experience, and your insights. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
I'll send you the invoice, Martin.
Don't tell the others.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, chaps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you would like to be part of another panel in the future, please just let me know. I will definitely be doing these again, because Dan, Pete, and Danny, I really, really enjoyed that. Great content, as Darren here saying, thanks, guys. Morris, great content. And that comes from the three panelists. Thank you so much. Sorry I couldn't get through all of your comments. I hope you, and Chris, oh, I've lost him. Where is he? There we go. Great chat. Thanks, gents. So yeah, please do get in touch if you would like to. And Marianne, thank you for your contributions. Really superb session. Loved it. So big thumbs up. And Joshua, again, thank you for your contribution as well. I will turn this into a podcast that you can get through all the usual channels. Thank you all so much for joining a very different show, but a thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyable one. So for you watching now and recorded, and especially to the panelists, thank you very much. See you next Tuesday.